Arizona Wildlife Views, brought to you by the sale of hunting and fishing licenses and the Heritage Fund, lottery dollars working for wildlife. Some projects made possible by the Sportfish and Wildlife Restoration Fund.
Find birds. Let's go.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Arizona Wildlife Views. I'm your host, Jim Harkin. On today's show, we take you around the state and introduce you to some of our favorite places to view wildlife. And did you know that one of those places happens to be right in the middle of Phoenix? But first, experience the excitement with some youngsters on a special goose hunt at the Cibola Wildlife Refuge. It's 5 a.m., hours before the sun rises. The sleepy kids being ferried in that truck manage to keep their eyes wide open. Once they're snug in their blinds, there's time for a nap. The serenade of geese in early morning is music to one's ears.
It's like being out in the woods and hearing that elk bugle first thing in the morning. It's the same thing when you're out there in the dark and you hear those geese coming and you see those big flights.
About the only thing that could get the kids out of their warm sleeping bags this early is the second annual Cibola Youth Goose Hunt.
Well, the goose hunt started in 2007. I was approached by the property manager of Cibola Refuge to lend a hand, finding some guys that wouldn't mind helping take some kids goose hunting.
It's very important to have the youth involved in the outdoors. You know, it's the overall experience of spending the day in the field with a young child, but you know, beyond that, these kids are our future. You know, in 20 years, these are going to be the kids that are voting on land issues, and these are going to be the kids that are dealing with wildlife issues. So once you get involved in this, you kind of understand it's a really big picture that you're looking at and that you're working with these kids. So it's been very rewarding for all of us.
And if this event is any indication, the future is in good hands.
And so I see this as being a really big deal. This one youth hunt not only draws them out for the hunt, but they come out here and they can experience shooting bows and arrows on an archery range, pick up a BB gun and try to hit some clay targets, or you know, just experience in general what it is to be out here in the wild.
And lo and behold, we went from 22 kids last year to 52 kids this year, and we hunt Saturday and Sunday mornings.
That flapping you see over by the blind, it's called flagging, and it's just one type of decoy used to lure birds to within shooting distance.
There they are out front. Shoot them! All the decoys are an attractant for the geese. We do the calling, you have the decoys, we have flagging. The flagging mimics the goose flapping its wings hitting the ground, and you mix that in with the decoys because the geese see the decoys from a distance, and they want to come and see what they're feeding on, and they want to join the group. If they're feeding in a cornfield or an alfalfa field like this and they're hungry, since their friends are here, they'll hopefully come down and have lunch with them. And we're just trying to mimic that whole situation. To call a goose in is that you have to read what the goose is doing. If they're coming right at you, are they going past you, are they circling? If they're coming right at you, how to call a goose in is really, you're listening to what the goose is saying. If the goose is honking, you're honking. You honk, he honks. Wait for his honk back to him. Now if there's a flock of them and they're making a lot of noise, try and duplicate what they're doing. And typically when the geese start getting closer to you, they start to slow down on their calling, and a lot of the time you're just trying to mimic what they're doing. You want to talk back and forth. You just want listen to what they're saying. They'll tell you what they want to hear.
Of course, the kids came up with their own unique way of calling geese.
Here, Goose, Goose.
And at the conclusion of last year, we talked as a group and said, wouldn't it be great if we could also have the island unit next year and hunt ducks as well? The refuge was able to do that for us. They closed the entire refuge. We bumped it up to 48 kids. Cibola Sportsman's Club here in Cibola was very generous and donated some of their private blinds this year. So with probably like a month and a half to go, we bumped it up from 48 to 54 kids.
Duck Island is a short drive from the geese fields. Like our goose hunters, our duck hunters enjoyed a breathtaking sunrise while waiting for their quarry. The mentors for both youth hunts have placed the decoys in a surefire pattern to attract the ducks, but sometimes a little adjusting is needed.
A lot of the kids that are coming out for this have never even been involved in a waterfowl hunt at all, which it's, you know, last year, my first time in the blind with some kids out here on one of these weekends, I mean, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know how the kids would be. I mean, a lot of times it's cold. We leave in the morning, it's early, it's dark, it's cold. You know, there's not a lot that happens at first. Sometimes the birds don't fly for a while. And I tell you, the kids were so excited to see all the thousands of geese flying over in the morning. And everybody I talked to said, regardless of whether the kids got to harvest anything or not, that the overall experience, I mean, it's something they've never seen before, something they've never witnessed. And it's even if you've been around a long time, it's hard not to get excited when you hear the geese first thing in the morning.
It's been a great time. All the kids have fun. It's a lot of camaraderie, the way it should be. The best part for me about the youth hunt would have to be getting the kids out here and actually calling the birds in for them and watching that first reaction of a kid their first time shooting a goose or a duck. That's better than anything I could think of, even in my hunting career, watching a kid for the first time get their first goose or duck. And there you go.
There is a saying that when the geese honk high, expect fair weather, and when they're low, expect foul. With no geese and only 2 ducks taken, maybe today's just too beautiful of a day. But the kids understand that this is hunting and there are no promises. Sometimes it's just enough to get outdoors and enjoy oneself. The department provided an avian influenza check station for successful hunters.
It's a 2-day event. It's a really good event, and boy, it really does bring the youth out and shows them kind of what the outdoors are about. Gets them pretty much out of the house and home and away from the TV, and gets them back into the outdoors, you know, which is where we'd like to start our young these days.
We put on a camp-style setting with food, beverages. We have raffles. Everything's free. It's been a great success so far.
But thanks to the many sponsors of the hunt, no kid went home empty-handed.
James Ray? Roy? Yeah? Is that you?
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, that's it.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
All right.
Good job.
All right. Oh, God. Yeah, I got Big Bird right.
People in Phoenix are going batty. No, not that kind of batty. The kind of batty that actually involves real bats. Come along with us on one of our wildlife workshops and find out more about these amazing little creatures. One of the real pleasures of living in Arizona is being close to all of the wildlife that surrounds us. Whether you spot cottontails in the urban park or watch your favorite birds in your own backyard, wildlife is never very far away.
Well, I wanted to thank you folks for coming on out tonight. This is our 5th or so bat workshop that we've done, maybe 6th. And we're sitting right on top of a big flood control structure here that runs a mile under the city. And there's about 7,000 bats or so that are using this as a roost site. They exit at 3 different localities. They exit here, and we get roughly about 1/3 of the bats out this end. Some nights they give us a great show here. Some nights it's so-so. So we can't, promise a great deal, but we will see bats for sure.
That's right, bats. Thousands of them, right here at 40th Street and Camelback.
The bats in this colony are Mexican freetails. And Mexican freetails are one of those species of bats that tend to form the largest colonies. Carlsbad, Bracken Cave, the bridge you always read about over in Austin, those are all freetail bat colonies. Freetail bats are migratory, so they're only going to be here for the next few weeks. And so on into October or so, and then these bats are going to leave just like white-winged doves and many of the other birds that migrate here, and they're going to fly down to Mexico, and some of these are going to go way, way, way down into Mexico. And then they're going to show up, typically they start showing up in April, and they reach their full complement or their full numbers by May sometime. And we're usually start our bat watching workshops about May, mid-May, early May, to take advantage of the bats and get as many workshops as we can.
The people here tonight are attending one of the Arizona Game and Fish Department's free bat workshops. They're held throughout the summer before the bats head south for the winter.
About 80% of the bats found in the world are insectivorous, and all the bats that live in this roost are insectivorous. So they're eating moths and beetles and mosquitoes and all kinds of things that we generally find annoying and often consider pests. And bats are very important that way. Some of the bigger colonies eat, like the one out of Carlsbad Cavern or Bracken Cave, eats 20 tons of insects a night. And granted, that's a very big colony, but something like this is probably consuming several hundred pounds of insects every night, this colony alone.
Besides getting a cool bat poster and other educational materials, participants are also treated to a presentation that will dispel a lot of myths about bats.
They're animals that are greatly misunderstood. They're one of these type of animals that the more we understand, the better idea we've got of what they do and what kind of threat or the role they play in the environment, the kinder we tend to be with them. And that's the whole idea of this workshop, that if you guys get to see them, get to be around them a little bit, learn a little bit more about them, the next time you see a bat fluttering around a light or you end up with one accidentally in your home or roosting on your porch, you're not worried about it. Bats don't bite people unless they're handled. We don't have bats flying into people's hair or things like that. That's a wives' tale. But bats often will fly very, very close to you. So if you're out and you're standing around, it's not uncommon to have a bat fly within a couple inches of you because he's catching the insects that are attracted to your body heat and the CO2 that you're giving off and things like that. And that tends to scare people. And again, those bats aren't going to run into you. They don't want anything to do with you. They're just going about their day-to-day activities.
Finally, the light is low enough and the bats begin to emerge from the tunnel, and the show begins.
Where are the bats going when they leave the tunnel? They are going to your neighborhood. And so they are dispersing all out over this town. No doubt many of them are feeding right over this canal that is going to house a lot of insects. They're going to drink over the canal, but they're going to disperse. Some bats will fly 30, 50 miles or more each night to go out and feed. So they can cover a tremendous distance each evening. And so they're the bats you're probably going to be seeing around. Although this species typically flies high enough to where you generally don't see them once they disperse.
The Arizona Game and Fish Department offers a wide variety of free or low-cost wildlife workshops every year all across the state to help the people of Arizona better understand and connect with the wild environment around them.
Pretty interesting and kind of scared.
Scared? What did they look like? What you think they were going to look like?
No.
What do you think they were going to look like?
They're going to look like pretty vicious bats, like in the movies.
Oh, it's great. I love to see these things fly around. It's a real good opportunity for us to see them in their habitat.
By attending workshops like these, people become more aware of the wildlife that shares our city, and hopefully they will use that understanding to make the human-wildlife experience a richer and safer one for both the people and the animals. The Arizona Game and Fish Department owns a number of properties with some prime wildlife habitat. So today, the Wildlife Viewing Guide takes us to a few of those special places.
We never know the worth of water till the well is dry, wrote Thomas Fuller in 1732. But attuned to the cycles of life in the desert, with its long, harsh summers softened only by unpredictable monsoon rains, its often dry landscapes with their hidden springs and seeps, the people of Arizona have had to learn the worth of water, not only to us, but to the wildlife that share our home. The Arizona Game and Fish Department, using funds from sources other than taxpayer dollars, has been able to acquire more than 14,000 acres of land vital to the continued health of our wildlife. These lands are divided up into 11 designated wildlife areas scattered across Arizona. Many of these areas are being protected because they provide water that birds and animals rely on. The first to be purchased through this program was Winema, near Springerville, in 1993.
When I came to the department, I was really excited about being able to get on the ground floor into land acquisition program, because in my opinion, restoring habitat, preserving habitat for future generations is really the thing that the legacy of the department one of the legacies the department can provide. And I really enjoyed working on this project because, this is something now that'll be held into the future.
The Winema Wildlife Area was purchased from a private landowner. The property is home to many different kinds of animals, including a herd of deer that are sometimes seen frolicking in the morning sun. The Little Colorado River, which runs through the Winema property, gave the Arizona Game and Fish Department two good reasons to purchase the property. First, the river provides valuable riparian habitat, a ribbon of flowing waters and lush greenery through the otherwise dry landscape of the western White Mountains.
There was a mule deer herd down here that was fairly low in numbers, and consequently with the habitat improvement, their numbers have gone. We've got a real healthy mule deer herd down here.
The Winema Wildlife Area is not just valuable for its wildlife, people enjoy it too.
So we're conserving the resources here, but still enabling the public to enjoy those resources without being all blocked up. And also we've done some proactive things in terms of creating trails, the interpretive signing and that type of thing that provide an education for the folks, and then gives them some rationale of why the areas were protected. And I think that really helped when they know what are the reasons that this was set aside and was purchased, if they know that it is from a wildlife standpoint, from a habitat standpoint, and I think then they really support it a lot stronger that way.
In the 12 years that have passed since the Winema property was purchased, some dramatic changes have been seen, especially in the quality of river habitat for fish and songbirds.
And then beavers also moved in, and they started creating dams, and they've created a lot of backwaters and ponds that helped raise the water table, and consequently the vegetation became more and more vigorous, and it's really become now a lush riparian for the most part along the channel. As fast as Arizona is growing, a number of areas throughout the state, we're losing a lot of habitats, and really particularly key habitats such as riparian. They're very popular with, certainly recreationists, developers and that type of thing. And this was an opportunity to really kind of preserve a piece of Arizona that really could provide a lot of unique benefits for the future and for the kids in the future.
As it was for Winema, water was the reason for protecting the Coal Mine Canyon property as well. Purchased in December of 2004, Coal Mine Canyon is the most recent area to be protected by the Arizona Game and Fish Department.
If you hike into Coal Mine Canyon, you'll see big rocky boulders and cliffs and stands of green ocotillo and agaves. It's a beautiful desert grassland with lots of rocky outcrops. And then of course there's this really rich riparian area with lots of ash and a few cottonwoods and willows and the water that bubbles through it throughout it. It's really a beautiful place. There is this riparian corridor that goes through it. And so this area is really important to a lot of species, even species that we think of as upland species like mourning dove or Gambel's quail or mule deer. They all like to come down to that lush vegetation that's in the riparian areas. And when the area is really dry in the hot summer, it's really important that those riparian areas be protected.
This small fish, the Gila top minnow, used to fill southern Arizona streams with darting silver flashes of light. Eaters of mosquitoes and mosquito larvae, These useful fish have been losing their natural habitat for decades. Until now, only 14 populations are left. Of these 14 populations, the one at Coal Mine Spring is the only population of Gila top minnow that has no competition from exotic fish, making this area especially important for the recovery of this fish species. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service listed the Gila top minnow as endangered on the Federal Endangered Species List in 1967.
One of the functions of the Game and Fish Department is to work with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to try to take an endangered species back to a point where it's no longer endangered and we can see it delisted.
To implement the recovery plan through purchase of the Coal Mine Canyon property, the Arizona Game and Fish Department formed a unique public-private partnership with Arizona State Parks, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the Trust for Public Lands, and a willing seller who sold the property at a reduced price in order to see its wildlife values conserved for the future. The acquisition was completed in December of 2004. This newest property was acquired for public use just in time.
If in fact this property had not been purchased, it would have been developed into residential lots. That is what's happening to the balance of the property that is not being purchased.
The funding for these properties has been from outside sources, so no taxpayer dollars were used. The Coal Mine Canyon property is going to be managed by Arizona State Parks as part of the Sonoyta Creek State Natural Area.
The public does have access to this area. They have foot access through the Sonoyta Creek State Natural Area. I've talked to people who have hiked up there and they have talked about what a beautiful place it is and what a wonderful acquisition it is.
From Winema Wildlife Area to Coal Mine Canyon and at 9 areas in between, Arizona Game and Fish Department is hard at work providing opportunities for recreation and leisure, as well as key habitat for animals, fish, and birds.
Every year, thousands of Arizonans do a little something extra for non-game wildlife in our state. In our next story, we take a look at the important works emanating from these programs.
Much of Arizona's natural biological diversity is composed of non-game species, meaning wildlife that is neither hunted nor fished in a traditional sense. The Arizona Game and Fish Department's non-game branch was created over 2 decades ago to protect, conserve, and maintain non-game and endangered species throughout the state. This dedicated staff has even had the satisfaction of reintroducing several native species that had disappeared from Arizona's landscape.
Probably some of the bigger ones that come to mind are reestablishment of wildlife populations that at one time existed in the state and for one reason or another had no longer existed in the state, and we had the opportunity to bring them back. So things like black-footed ferret, the California condor, Mexican wolf, more recently our efforts with black-tailed prairie dog. Those are some of the highlights where you're actually putting Arizona kind of back on a more even keel with where it once was. Well, we were one of the leading states in the nation to have a first staffer on board, a member who was designated with the duties of doing non-game wildlife management. It was a concept that was in the works for a long time, but really got underway in the early 80s. In 1983, we had our first position hired on in the non-game branch chief position, and he was charged with developing the program. And he quickly turned that into an opportunity called the Arizona Wildlife Fund, which is a taxpayer opportunity to contribute funds and help support the program. The Arizona Game and Fish Department doesn't receive any general fund money, which is money that would come in from typical taxpayer input to the state economy. And we don't receive any of that at the Arizona Game and Fish Department. So this Arizona Wildlife Fund, or non-game checkoff program, is an opportunity for all citizens of Arizona to contribute to wildlife conservation in Arizona and have it out there for the enjoyment of all the citizens of the state. One of the programs we're looking to build in future years with this program is what we call our Watchable Wildlife Program. It's a little bit different than our typical activities that are associated with the Arizona Game and Fish Department. This is a non-consumptive use, generally speaking. It's not a harvested opportunity. There are just a lot of people in the state that just enjoy interacting with wildlife, and it may be viewing them from a particular blind bird watching, a lot of the events that just people associate with their experience in the outdoors when they're not out angling or hunting for wildlife. We see that as an incredibly important part of Arizona's wildlife and a significant a program that's important for all the citizens of the state. I mean, a lot of people really value their interaction with wildlife, and we're looking to just promote that. We want people to connect with Arizona's wildlife. We want people to recognize that they value that opportunity, that interaction, and quite frankly, we want people to understand that the wildlife doesn't just magically happen. There's a lot of pressures on our species and habitats today, and there's a lot of oversight and management that's required to ensure healthy populations into the future. The Game and Fish Department is responsible for that. Personally, it's my biggest satisfaction. I mean, there's nothing more important to me than the future of wildlife in this state. It's just a beautiful state with an incredible diversity of wildlife. We have Apache trout, Sonoran pronghorn, the list goes on, and I'm just committed to seeing them exist in our future. I've got kids that I want to see enjoy wildlife, and I'm hopeful that the efforts that we're conducting out of our department here and through the generosity of the people of Arizona, that we can continue to have that into the future.
And that's our show for this evening. If you have questions about anything you saw on the show, go to our website at azgfd.gov. On behalf of producers Gary Schaefer and Carol Lind, I'm your host, Jim Harkin. We'll see you next time.